Okay, question number 2 was, can I speak to crimping cover crops to reduce herbicide usage and chemical fertilizer usage over time? What are some of the primary considerations? The answer to that is yes, I can. I can speak to roller crimper considerations. So basically, when we look at roller crimpers, there's 3 things that you have to get right if you're going to have successful roller crimping. And it's the right equipment, it's the right species, and the right timing. And so I just want to take a moment and address each one of these because I've seen roller crimping work really well, and I've seen it work quite poorly, even to the point of it hardly looks like you were out there at all. And it's simply by not having one of these things right, or maybe 2 of these things right. So number 1, you got to have the right equipment. You can't just go out there with any old piece of equipment and expect to get a good kill. Now, I have seen people go out there with an old cultipacker and do a halfway decent job. And if you hit the timing just right, you can make it work pretty well. But if you really want to do this, and particularly if you're an organic grower, or if you're really wanting to try to get away from herbicides, you need the right equipment. And you because you don't want to cut the plants, you want to crimp them. And that's why it's called a roller crimper. You don't want to just roll it down with just a smooth drum. You need to not only roll it, but you need to crimp it. And that's what these blades are on here for, because you want to bend that stem. You want to break the vascular system of the plant so it can no longer move nutrients up and down and the photosynthates up and down through the plant. And so you have to have proper equipment to actually get that crimping action on those plant stems. So this is the Rodale design. Cool thing about this, they kind of invented this. Well, they did invent this design, but they definitely would be the ones that would have credit for, really doing the most to promote and develop roller crimpers here in the United States. And here's the neat thing. You can go right to their website. You can go right to that link right there, and you can download the architectural blueprints to build one of these yourself. So they developed it, they designed it, they talked about trying to patent it, but in the end, they decided that it was better to just make this freely available to the public for the greater good of, humanity, if you will. And so you can go on their website, you can download these blueprints for free, and you can take it into your own shop, or if you got a local welding shop there, they can build you one of these. Now, almost all of the roller crimpers that I've seen are based somewhat on this design. I'll show you a couple others later on here that kind of modify this or tweak it a little bit. But it's a fairly simple concept. You just need a drum, and that drum, it varies. I've seen it as narrow as 12 inches. I've seen it as big as, probably 36 inches. I'm not sure what these are, probably 24. But you typically, that's a hollow drum, and you want to be able to fill it with water because you need that extra weight in order to really be effective at crimping. So you want to be able to fill it with water. And then the blades that are on there, they're not sharp because we don't want to cut the plant. We just want to crimp it or bend it. And so it's just kind of a flat plate or a flat bar, and with that square edge, so that you get that crimping action without the cutting action. And the most effective ones are done in a chevron pattern like this, because if you just have them straight back and forth, which is way easier to build, the straight back and forth ones, you tend to get a lot of hop and bounce as you're driving through the field, because that whole blade is all hitting the ground at the same time, and you just tend to get a lot of hop, where this you can run 12 miles an hour with very little hop or movement back there, because the way that chevron blade, it's not all on the ground at the same time. So that's kind of the right equipment there. Like I said, here's some other designs. This is one I think that a company in Australia makes. I think they're exporting to the United States. So it's very similar, but you can see they just put a lot more of the bars in here so they can get a lot more wax at each stem, thus increasing the effectiveness of actually terminating a cover crop that way. Now you can also get these, and we actually have a set of these. These are Dawn ZRX. These mount right on the front of your planter, and so these are a very small drum. That's probably only a 5 or 6 inch tube, and it doesn't have the chevron pattern. It's got kind of it's got the same type of blade, but in smaller sections because it's such a small diameter. And that mounts right on the front of your planter. And so you can, as you drive through the field planting, you're rolling the cover crop down right there, and then you're planting right behind it. And so that works pretty well in some settings. Other settings, it's not nearly as good. What we found is we can't get the down pressure on this that we could get on a big dedicated crimper, partly because we just don't have the weight on our planter, because we still have to have plenty of weight for our planter units. And also the smaller drum, it just doesn't.
Recording in progress.
It doesn't give me as many wax on the crop as well. Here's another one that somebody built, just to give you, some ideas. You can see it's a, they don't have one continuous bar going across. It's kind of a checkerboard pattern there to a little bit. And then Steve Groff, many of you may know Steve. He's up in Pennsylvania. He probably was one of the first guys to run roller crimpers here in the United States, at least run it very successfully. And Steve and I are pretty good friends, and he came all the way out to Nebraska to buy this thing. This is a Buffalo stock chopper. And so Buffalo is a company out here in Nebraska, and they made a lot of cultivators and stock choppers and things like this. And so this is a stock chopper, but it's in individual units, and so you can kind of move these back and forth as you want them. Well, he basically took this and he took the blades off and he dulled them up. He put square stock on instead of cutting blades. He put crimping blades, and there's a front rank and a back rank, so everything is getting whacked twice as he rolls through with this thing. And he's been using this, he's just been kind of fixing it up and going. He's probably been using this for close to 30 years now, and it works just fine. And so you don't have to have super sophisticated, fancy stuff, particularly if you do the other two things right with the right timing and stuff. You can see Steve there in his field of rye, and that rye is as tall as he is. And so, it's at the right stage, which we'll talk about in just a little bit here. And so I show you these last two because you don't have to go out and buy a commercial one. Now you can download those blueprints and buy, and build the Rodale design. But, farmer ingenuity is just super cool, in my opinion. And, farmers love to tinker and try to make things better. So don't be afraid to do that. And like I say, I was in California last week, and those guys are out there dragging old cultipackers through their orchards and just, using the cultipacker wheels to smash down their cover crops. And it probably wasn't completely killing it, but it was not doing too bad a job. It was laying it down pretty decent. So the second thing is you want to have the right species. And so we want to choose things. If we know we're going to roller crimp, we want to choose things that have bigger stems, particularly hollow stems. Big hollow stems crimp really easily, and a taller stature is better. So as a general rule, something that has very thin stems and is relatively short is going to be really hard to crimp. So think annual ryegrass. You'll never kill annual ryegrass by crimping it. It's tiny little stems, and it's not very tall, and it's got a massive root system. It's a great cover crop, but you're not going to take it out with a roller crimper. Whereas cereal rye, it's still got a big old root system, but it's got relatively big stems, hollow stems. It gets tall, and you can just roll right through that stuff and hammer it down. Peas roll really well. Again, they've got that bigger, hollower stem. They don't get tall, but they do get long. Those tendrils tend to get long, so you can get multiple whacks on it as you're going through the field. And then if you're planning a mix and you want to crimp the whole mix, try to select species that have similar maturities, because the third thing is you need to get the right timing on this. And so the right timing is when these things are close to anthesis, or actually flowering. So with cereal rye, if you can walk out there and if you have allergies, you know exactly when that is, because you'll probably be sneezing because of all of the rye pollen, but you can actually see all the little yellow pollen on the anthers of the cereal rye head. And when that's out, when it's fully flowering, it's very susceptible to being rolled and killed, terminated through crimping. Peas, when it's blooming, hairy vetch when it's blooming. So typically when a plant is blooming is the best time to do it. And so again, if you have multiple things out there, you want to try to get them to where they are all going to bloom at similar times, because if you're too soon or you're too late, both will be less effective. And sometimes we've had to go through and crimp twice because our rye was ready before the vetch was. And so we had to go through and roller crimp down the cereal rye. and then you can come back later and hit the vetch if you need to. And if you're not organic, you can still roller crimp and you can save a lot on herbicides. And I've heard, Steve Groff say this many times. When he roller crimps and Steve's not organic, he says a little herbicide can go a long way. So if he roller crimps through the field and he thinks that he's got some things that aren't going to completely die, he may go out there and put a little bit of herbicide on, but he can cut his rate way back because that's already an injured plant, and injured plants cannot tolerate other stresses nearly as well as a healthy plant. And so if you need to do both, roll it down first and then put a little bit of herbicide on to kind of clean it up there. So